Today we're making scallion oil noodles, a traditional Shanghai niche dish that is simple yet incredibly flavorful. And the star of the show, of course, is the scallion oil. Now, regardless of what the original recipe was, most restaurants nowadays use shallots instead of scallion, mainly because it has a more intense and sweeter flavor, making flavor extraction easier. And also, scallion, shallots, onion, they share the same Chinese characters, so it's interchangeable anyway. Today, we do my version, starting with the shallots, but we layer different flavors of the scallions along the way. Let's do it. Simply slice some shallots. When it comes to oil infusion, I find the smaller the shallots, the more intense the flavors. So if you're using banana shallots, just use a bit more. And you can easily store the oil in your fridge for up to a week. So make more than you think you need. We heat up our pot, cold oil to prevent sticking, and be generous with the vegetable oil. We're making an oil infusion here, not sauté shallots. The oil will cool down the pan, and you're aiming for about 120 degrees Celsius for this to slowly infuse without burning. So shallots go in. So first, the oil will evaporate most of the water content from the shallots, concentrating their flavors. Then all the fat-soluble flavors from the shallots will start infusing the oil. The sugar content from the shallot would slowly caramelize, binding with the amino acid of the shallot to give us the Maillard reaction, the complex meaty flavors. So very gentle heat. While that's happening, I like to throw in a few presentation pieces of scallion for garnish. And of course, if your scallion comes with the root goes in. They're full of flavors. And what I like to do is I score the scallion white on both sides. This goes in. But for the majority of the scallion, what I want from them is not that deep, intense flavor, but to retain the fragrance and freshness, the kind of note you would associate from the condiment of a Hainanese chicken rice or Cantonese white cut chicken. And to achieve that, you need a much shorter contact period. So we simply slice them thin, however you like. I like to rotate, and these will go in much later to retain that freshness that we just talked about. And that's one of the fun things about cooking, is that you layer flavors. The same ingredient could give you something completely different if you treated it differently. Perfect. Now, the scallion green, I want to maintain even more freshness from them. So they literally go in the very last minute to give us freshness, to balance the richness of the scallion oil. Perfect. And precisely because the minimal contact with heat they'll have, we soak them in a bit of ice water, just to get rid of that harshness. Now we check on the oil. Once the shallots start to turn golden, we're good to go. So this is the color we're aiming for. Lightly golden, but nowhere near brown. We grab a sieve, and we have extremely flavorsome scallion oil. Now, this for me is where the fun begins. We have slowly extracted almost everything from the shallots and the scallion, almost being the key word, because there are two things the oil left behind: the sweetness and the umami from the water-soluble sugar and amino acid. And we're going to mop that up right now. Heat back on, and what better liquid to absorb and reinforce the umami than light soy sauce. Now, the main objective is to extract the flavors. We don't want this to be overly salty, so I like to dilute it with equal part water. And thanks to the evaporation of water content earlier, the flavors of the shallots and the scallions are incredibly concentrated. Brilliant. Just a couple of minutes, we set it aside, we can make some noodles. Like I said, the star of the show really is the oil. So you can use any noodles for this, even udon, vermicelli, they all work well. Today, just some wheat noodles. Whenever I'm cooking wheat-based noodles, I always like to have some ice water or cold water nearby. So whenever the boiling gets too vigorous, you just add a small splash and it calms down again, saving you the effort of having to keep adjusting the heat. Perfect. Once you have the texture, we can plate Now, just to go the extra mile today, I'm plating on the stove, but you can just mix everything together really. We have wonderful scallion oil. Don't go overboard with the oil, just a thin layer. Now, the scallion white we sliced earlier, just a tiny bit of heat to get the fresh flavors. Once they're slightly wilted, noodles go in. Now, whenever it feels slightly dry, a touch more scallion oil. Our extremely umami-rich liquid goes in, taking a bit of the shallots with you. Now, everything comes together beautifully. You can use dark soy for the color, but for me, I want the scallion to remain the star of the show. I don't want this to become a soy sauce noodle dish. Just a thin layer to coat everything. Stove off, we mix in the scallion green for freshness. Just residual heat, beautiful. Just a bit more for garnish. And my favorite part of the dish, the braised, scored scallion white sits on top. And that's it. That's from a recipe request. This is my scallion noodle.